Oh, there we go.
Okay.
All right, welcome ladies. I'm to the Professional Women's Network of Costa Rica's June virtual event. I would like to, well, first I am Sarah Joy. I am the president of the PWNCR, and I'd like to welcome you all. Thanks for being with us here today. I am going to introduce Katya real quick and then let her take it away. So Katya De Luisa is considered to be one of Costa Rica's early expat pioneers. She's resided here since 1980 and is a nationalized Costa Rican citizen. She's an artist, author, and freelance writer whose articles focus on healthy aging and dementia. And she has this amazing project for dementia education, which she's gearing up to be able to provide support and education throughout, especially the rural areas of Costa Rica, which is hugely important. And she's going to talk to us about mental health and aging and dementia. So here you go, Katya. Thank you.
Hi. Well, what we're going to talk about is exploring dementia. So we will be talking about the brain. We will be talking about a healthy brain. We will be talking about how dementia changes it. We're going to be talking about symptoms, what causes dementia, some of the causes of it, what the symptoms are. And then we'll go into what they lose. And at the very end, we'll talk about what's still there to the very end. Too many people think that at the very end, the person is no longer there. How many? Well, we've got just a few here right now. So we're just going to have, we're just going to continue on. And as people come on, they'll just get whatever part of it that they're going to get. How many of you, I want you to just think about your own brain. And do you actually have a clear idea of how your brain works and how it affects you and how it allows you to function? Do you know that? But very, very few people, usually when I ask in a group for people to raise their hand, I literally get nobody unless they're a nurse or a medical professional who actually understands how their brain works. So if you don't understand how your brain works, it's going to be pretty hard to understand how dementia is damaging someone who has damaging the brain of someone who has dementia, especially if it's one of your loved ones. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the PowerPoint full screen. I'm going to bear with me a minute. Sarah and I have been practicing this. Okay. All right, share. And there we go. Hey, seamless, Sarah. Your lessons were great. Okay, this is, I'm naming everything part of everything that I'm teaching, not just this educational program, but the other things that I'm doing are all part of a brand name that I'm creating called Dementia Inside Out, which I think kind of is self-explanatory, you know, of what my beliefs are. Okay, so we're going to be talking about exploring dementia. So that's what we're going to do in this presentation. All right, let me move my little box over here. Okay. As I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about healthy brain function, dementia brain damage, causes and symptoms, healthy memory. What is a healthy memory? Because I'm sure all of us, including myself, have concerns over my memory. Dementia, memory impairment, altered sensory perception. I would say a good 60 to 70% of the problems people have with dementia are altered sensory perception, which is how they perceive the world outside of themselves, and dementia behaviors and why. All right, wait a second. Okay, our brain. All right, this is what it looks like. Our brain is 3 pounds. This is just some simple information. Our brain is 3 pounds. It's 60% fat. So, you know, people on low-fat diets, do be careful that you're getting some fat, hopefully the healthy fat. 75% water. If you don't hydrate, your brain's not going to work properly. It's composed of 2 hemispheres, and we won't go into what each hemisphere does. There's an absolutely great video that I just watched on YouTube with Jill Bolton Ross, I think her last name is, and she's the author of A Stroke of Insight. She talked about how having a stroke, while she was having a stroke, her perceptions during that time. Well, she has another one out called The Whole Brain, which has to do with a new book, and she talks a lot about the 2 sides of the brain and what they do, but we're not going to go into too much about that because we don't have the time. Interesting, the brain can't feel pain. In other words, if you open up the skull can feel pain, but if you open up the skull, the doctor can do brain surgery in your brain with you totally conscious and not feel a thing. The storage capacity is unlimited, which means anything you learn, anything, I don't care what it is, your brain can store it. It has unlimited capacity for storage, much more than your computer. And learning something new changes your brain structure because you get connections, neuronal connections happen, and your brain structure changes, okay? All right, this is a simple drawing of the mechanism by which we function. They're called neurons. And we have 86 to 100 billion neurons in our brain. And we're actually born with all of them, but we're just not born with the connections. Our experiences help us with the connections. Say, for instance, these are called dendrites. The signal, this is where your information is stored in the cell body. Then the information is shot out here to these connecting little knobs that connect to other knobs that are connected to other neurons, the 86 to 100 billion of them. And these dendrites also connect up and pass information signals back and forth. So each one of our synaptic connections, which are these right here, can have as many as 7,000 connections to other neurons. So that's over 100 trillion connections. So even though dementia damages someone's brain, it's not going to completely erase it's not going to completely erase all of the information that is in their lifetime of living. Okay, neurons transmit electrical signals. We are electrical beings, and our brain is an electricity. It stores electricity, and it generates electricity, and it passes electricity. And every one of those little relays that are being passed is information and nutrients passed to other neurons, 86 billion of them. I'll keep saying that because it's very important to understand how many of these little guys there are. All right, now this is what a neuronal network looks like. This is an incredibly microscopic section of a brain. And as you can see, everything lights up. It's just like an electrical storm in your brain. And the dendrites and the axon that pass see the little, oops, I'm using my finger like you're in the room. See how these synapses are connected, but I'm going to show you right now as we go along that they're not 100% connected, but the signal does pass through them. Here, I'll show you one more time. Come on, we're getting close. As you can see there, this is a synapsis. You can see the little buttons connecting. That's information being passed. 30,000 of these neurons can fit on the head of a pin. So figure how small they are. Okay, the cerebral system generates enough electricity to power a light bulb. So we are actually little electrical generators running around, and our brain is the power center for all of it. And this is basically what it looks like when we're thinking. It's pretty outrageous. I'm always amazed by these GIFs. I've just been so happy finding these animated things. Okay, it's also a neurochemical factory, and all of this is connected to how our brain functions. Now here's those synapses. And as you can see, they're not really touching each other. There's a shower of chemicals. I like to call it a chemical soup. You can see the little lightning bolts, which are basically signals that signal to release specific chemicals. So say, for instance, you just ate a box of chocolates. Well, you're going to get a flood of endorphins and dopamine in your chemical soup. So you've made a pleasing soup. If you just become very frightened by something, that soup is going to be adrenaline, cortisol, and the fight or flight mechanism. So this is what actually motivates us to react in our world and also perceive in our world. Okay. There's a list of the neurochemicals over there. There's more, but I just basically put the major ones. Now, synaptic pruning is important to understand because when you learn something new, those synapses connect up. But when you don't use information over a long period of time, they separate. And the dendrites, the little cords that connect them, start to disconnect and actually disappear. They dissolve. So that trigonometry that you learned in high school, that you haven't used since high school, is probably no longer in your system because it has long ago disconnected from anything that you're using. So the more you learn something or repeat something, the more you use it, the more that information is retained. So you either use it, or lose it. Very important, exercise your brain. Okay, another interesting part of the electrical system is the fact that we have brain waves. And brain waves are creating an electromagnetic field. So we actually have an electromagnetic field, just like the computer has an electromagnetic field. Other electrical items, like our refrigerator, has an electromagnetic field, but we also are an organic mass with an electromagnetic field because we operate through electrical signals. So brain waves are a very important part of it, and we have several. Now, brain waves have to work together. You've seen brain waves on the EEG machine, you know, if you've ever had that kind of a test. And the brain waves have to work together like a symphony, okay? And these are the basic brain waves that we have. Beta is what we're doing right now. We're thinking and talking, and that's beta. That's pretty much what we're in most of the time. They're all working together all the time. It's just one will be more to the forefront than the other one. Alpha is basically a meditative state when you go into kind of like daydreaming or you're meditating and you're not really thinking too much. That would be alpha. Delta is when you're falling asleep, REM sleep, and theta is total unconsciousness, when you are just unconscious. Gamma, interesting enough, is what's generated during meditation. They've done a lot of research on this, and they've actually done research on meditating monks. And the monks, it showed that they had an incredible increase in gamma waves. And gamma waves are high alertness. It's the highest functioning wave. In other words, we are functioning at our optimum when we are in gamma. So the less we actually think, because meditation is shutting off your thoughts and being in beta, because when you're thinking, you're in beta. So when you're actually not thinking, but you're in a concentrated attention, like you have with meditation, you're actually increasing your gamma waves, which are the absolute best to try and increase. And this is basically what your waves look like interacting with each other. They're going that fast or probably faster. Okay, we've got 70,000 thoughts per day, and most of those thoughts are on the past or the future. Our thoughts are about something we did long ago or something we did 10 minutes ago, and what we're going to do 10 minutes from now or 2 years from now, or at what dinner we're going to make. Very, very little thoughts are put into the present. And so most of our thoughts are from the past and going into the future. But the present, we just don't pay much attention to the present. So that's what mindfulness study is. Mindfulness is where you actually don't think about the past and the future, and you put your attention and focus on the moment, everything that's happening in the moment. So 70,000 of them a day, that's an awful lot of thoughts. So when you think about a person with dementia whose brain is damaged, I theorize a lot of things, and I theorize that some of those thoughts are just gone. But there's always going to remain thoughts. If you've got 70,000 thoughts a day, there's always going to remain some thoughts. But most of the unessential ones, I think, are gone or start to deteriorate. Not gone, but deteriorate. Okay, the brain processes 11 million bits of information per second, but we can only handle 40 to 50 bits per second. That means when you walked into wherever your computer is today to sit down for this talk, you focused on something. So when I walked into this room, I focused on the table where I was going to put the computer, because I'm at a friend's house right now because there's construction going on at my house. I focused on the table. So I didn't notice too much of anything else until I really just concentrated a little bit and looked around. But basically, my first focus was on the table, because as you come into a new environment, your brain is going to focus down because it cannot absorb all of the information around you. It would drive you insane to be aware of every single item around you. So we're only handling, out of that 11 bits of information per second that our brain is automatically processing, we can consciously, like I just saw the table, 40 to 50 bits per second. So there's a lot going on around you that you're totally unaware of. Okay, this is a synopsis of your brain function, just a quick one. You have a network of neurons that relay and store information. Your neurons transmit signals through an electrical and neurochemical system. Brain waves are electrical frequencies. And we are consciously aware of a very small amount of information. And if you don't use information, you lose it. So this is the basics of how your brain functions. So now you have an idea of how it works. Now we're going to go into what is dementia. Well, first of all, senile dementia doesn't exist. Senile dementia signifies that you get old, so you get dementia. You do not get dementia just because you age. There is a certain amount of memory loss, and there is a certain amount of loss of concentration that goes with aging. But dementia is not because of aging. Dementia is always because of some kind of an imbalance, either mental or physical. There's a lot of causes of dementia. Dementia is a symptom. I like to say that if you have a cold, a virus, you have a runny nose. Well, the runny nose is a symptom of the virus. It's not the reason. In other words, dementia is not a reason for losing cognitive abilities. It's a symptom of losing cognitive abilities, and it could be any of these little droplets that you see here. We've got Lewy bodies, Huntington's, Alzheimer's, and many more. Now, these that that you can see on the screen here are pretty much incurable, are considered by science at this particular time to be incurable. Now, there are some curable causes for dementia. And here's what they are. And this is just some of them also. Alcohol and drug use causes dementia. And over a period of time, they call it wet brain with alcoholism. It will start to destroy brain cells. Interaction of medications or side effects of medications. That is more common than anybody actually understands. On my Sunday dementia discussion group, I have a woman she's a regular now, and she had dementia, and she was diagnosed with Lewy bodies, but they weren't quite sure what she had, and it kept getting worse and worse. She lost 140 pounds because she thought that her food was lava. She couldn't eat it. And then she went into what they consider the later stages of dementia, was put in hospice. Well, when she was put in hospice, they took her off all her medications, because in hospice, it's about dying with dignity. So they don't keep you on your medications. You have to be agreeable to that. And so all her medications, and she started to get better. So her unspecified dementia was probably in part, if not all in part, because of the amount of medications they were pumping into her system. So be careful of your medications and interactions. Depression leads to dementia and causes dementia-like symptoms. Chemotherapy, all this is curable, because if you cure these causes, then the dementia dissipates. Hormone and vitamin imbalances. Now, this is really important. In the Blanco Cervantes Hospital here in Costa Rica, the geriatric hospital, the first thing they test you for when you go in thinking you might have dementia and you want to be tested is a blood test to see your vitamin B12 levels, because it is incredibly common with elderly people that they don't process vitamin B12. And if without it, it causes dementia symptoms. Thyroid imbalance also causes dementia symptoms. So now that's curable. I get a vitamin B12 shot once a month, just to be sure. And I can't tell you how perky I am for several days afterwards. It really just wakes you up. Okay, so they're basically most of the dementias that people are experiencing are that have been diagnosed, that are incurable, such as Alzheimer's. They are incurable. However, the curable causes, there are also curable causes too. That's why being diagnosed or getting your loved one diagnosed is incredibly important. Okay, symptoms. Dementia damages all of these different areas. So you can read them yourself, actually, and there's no sense me reading them. And it impairs physical abilities too. Eventually, the brain forgets how to swallow, for instance, in the later stages. And they aspirate food into their lungs, food and water, liquids. So often people don't necessarily die from the dementia, they die from the pneumonia caused by the dementia that damages their swallowing mechanism. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Alzheimer's, because that's usually on everybody's mind. Okay, Alzheimer's statistics, let's look at that. All right, now these are pretty scary statistics as far as Alzheimer's goes, which is the #1 cause of dementia right now. Is 1 in 9 seniors over 65 throughout the world, this is a world stat, have Alzheimer's, either the beginnings of it or they're in full-blown Alzheimer's. 55.2 million worldwide. And by 2050, there's going to be 150 million. In other words, it's going to triple in the next less than 30 years. It's the 6th leading cause of death in the US. More women than men have it, actually 2 to 3. And I believe that's because women live longer. Statistically, women live longer than men. And and life expectancy with Alzheimer's is 7 to 20 years. With Lewy bodies, for instance, which is another type of protein that damages the brain, it's actually in the same medical category as Parkinson's without the tremors. It's different, but they're in the same family. It's usually 5 to 7 years with Lewy bodies. So the life expectancy of 7 to 20 years with dementia is quite long. Okay, beta amyloid plaque is the cause of dementia. Now this plaque, they have a lot of research going on how to get rid of it, but they can't get rid of it because it's a normal product of what our brain creates. I mean, we have beta amyloid in our brains, for some reason, and science can't figure this out yet, there's a lot of controversy as to why, it doesn't clear out. It keeps accumulating. And as it accumulates, it destroys the cells. So you can see it just kind of sticks on, it's a sticky plaque, so it sticks onto the dendroid canals and the cell itself, eventually destroying both. And the other aspect of dementia, of Alzheimer's, is the tau tangles. Now, the tau tangles are connected to those information distributing dendrites. And this is, oops, let me go back a minute. Previous, hang on. Here's a normal cell. Here's one that has tau starting to damage it. As you can see, the tau is inside the information distributing mechanism. And then eventually this is what it looks like. So now here you can watch this, and remember you saw a healthy neuron system passing signals. This is what happens with Alzheimer's deterioration. This is a big piece of plaque. Looks like an invading species from another planet. And as you can see, that there's a deterioration of the connecting neurons. All of these connections get deteriorated. They start to pull away and they start to shrink. They start to disappear. Here's a dead neuron. The neuron itself starts to die. So it's like dead fruit on a tree with branches that are dying and falling off. And that's pretty much what happens inside the brain with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's also shrinks the brain. Actually, quite a few dementias shrink the brain because neurons are being destroyed. So if neurons are being destroyed, you're going to have shrinkage in the overall size of the brain. So here's a normal brain, and then here we have the Alzheimer's brain, and you can see how it's shrunk. This is our thinking. We're basically our thinking areas, how we put together all the information that we have stored in the brain, is done in the outer cortex of the brain. So you can see here's their thinking mechanism, how damaged it is. And the hippocampus is damaged. And there's basically holes in the brain. There's places where there is no more information. So when a person with dementia comes to a spot where they can't find a word, they can't find the information, period, because it's gone. It's just gone. Okay, here we have just a scary statistic. I'm a baby boomer, I'm an early baby boomer, and I'm at that age that, yeah, I'm thinking about what happens next. And we are going to need, in the next 27 years, 1.2 million additional care workers to take care of us as an aging population. We don't have them because basically the aging population is starting to outnumber the younger population. It's the younger population that would probably be taking care of us. So this is a pretty scary thought. This is, we're going to talk about memory. Oops, I did it again. Previous. Okay, memory is actually a jigsaw puzzle. You've got areas in your brain that are dedicated to specific functions, including what you remember. And so your memory is actually pieces of your experiences. So it's composed of, say, for instance, you've got sensory. It's composed of your sensory perceptions, your visual, what you see, what you hear. All of those are stored. The pieces of those experiences are taken and stored in different parts of your brain. And then there's certain parts of your brain that pull it all together, depending on the experience. Your emotions are also stored, connected to your perceptions and what you've learned intellectually, your religion, what your parents taught you, your values, all of that is broken up into different areas of your brain. And to recall a memory, your brain in a fraction of a second has to pull all of those elements back together. So let's just say, look at an apple. Like when I do my talks, I hand a couple of apples out, and so people can kind of have the tactile feel of them. So first of all, our brain, the first time we've ever had an experience with an apple, our brain sort of perceived it as red, round, smooth. Okay, that's how we saw it. And it tasted sweet and crunchy. So crunchy is basically your tactile, because we now know it's crunchy, and it tastes good. It tastes good. So emotionally, we like it. And then we learn intellectually what it's about, and it's something that grows on trees. It's something that we put in our mouth to eat, and we can buy it at the store. Mom's apple pie is also connected with experience and intellectual, because you watched mom making the apple pie. You were learning how to make an apple pie. And that apple pie and mom making the apple pie is maybe connected to your family holidays. So all of the memories that you have of even just an object like an apple is connected to all of these different stories of your life. All of these are stories of your life. So even if you gave an apple to your teacher, you might remember that teacher. You might remember something special about her, and that's why you gave her the apple. If you were a Catholic or a Christian, Adam and Eve story, the creation story, and how the apple kind of triggered human downfall. So just an apple, and all of these pieces connected to an apple are stored at different areas of our brain, and they have to be pulled back together when we think about what is an apple. Okay, so we're going to talk about sensory perception and how that changes during dementia. Okay, so we've got, basically we'll talk about sight right now. As you get older, you get tunnel vision, and tunnel vision is you lose a peripheral vision. In other words, the sides of your vision starts to narrow. And this is what tunnel vision looks like. It starts getting narrower and narrower until it's like you're looking through a tunnel. And this happens commonly with dementia. With progression of dementia, they commonly have tunnel vision, which causes a lot of problems, which we'll talk about in a minute. Depth perception loss is when something far away looks like it's right next to you. So you can see in this picture, it's not a very good picture, but I couldn't find too many pictures depicting it. As you can see, the guy in the back, if I were looking at this man and I had depth perception loss, I wouldn't be able to tell that one was farther down the hall than the other. And a person with dementia, when they lose depth perception, which is very common, they talk about in all the literature that they have visual changes. They will reach across the table. They will reach across for something thinking it's right in front of them. In other words, there'll be a fork across the table and they're reaching. Or that man that's down the hall, she might think that he's sitting right next to her and she might try to touch his shoulder, but he's way down the hall. So sometimes you think they're hallucinating, but they're really, it's a depth perception problem, and they're trying to grasp, like there's oranges on the counter over there. If I have depth perception, I think the orange is right here, so I'd try to grab it. So often that's a mistaken concept. They also, imagine what stairs look like if you lose the depth of something. You would not see that stairs go up and down. You would see stairs as just lines on the floor. When you lose depth perception, everything looks really flat. So it's very difficult to walk, for instance. And very early, when I started working with people with dementia, I realized it was their vision. A lot of the shuffling that they do is their vision, because they can't judge the distance to the floor. So they just don't lift their feet. They just keep their feet on the floor and they keep shuffling. This is a bit scary because they can't judge the speed of moving objects with depth perception loss. You can't tell how far, if there's something coming towards you in the distance, they can't tell how fast it's coming. So unfortunately, a lot of people are driving in those earlier stages of dementia, and they are experiencing alterations in their judgment on how fast something's coming. So it's an incredibly difficult time to try and figure out when should you take those car keys away from the person, especially because our independence is so geared towards the getting in our car and going. Hallucinations are another visual problem. I like to use this because I think this is really good. You know, people always talk about the elephant in the room, but what if there really was an elephant in the room? What if it looked like this? Because that's what it would look like if you hallucinated an elephant in the room. It would be that real. It would be as real as the two people reading. And then, of course, the person with dementia would say, "There's an elephant in the room." And what would everybody else say? You know, their family would probably say, "There's no elephant in the room. You're seeing things." "No, there's no elephant." Well, then that usually causes a lot of problems because what they're seeing is this. That looks pretty real. And actually, and a lot of visual hallucinations can also become auditory. They might hear the elephant make a noise. They might hear it break the couch. They might be able to walk up and touch it and actually feel the elephant. And here you are saying that there's no elephant in the room. So learning how to talk to a person with dementia who's hallucinating is really, really very important. Okay, they lose smell. It's one of the early markers of Alzheimer's disease, even before memory loss, is loss of smell. And a lot of doctors use that as a possible indicator for the possibility of having Alzheimer's, is when they've lost their sense of smell. And if you lose your sense of smell, you lose your sense of taste. And when you lose your sense of taste, everything tastes like cardboard. And depending on the texture, it might taste like mud. It has no flavor and it's got the consistency of mud. So a lot of people with dementia have problems. They have eating problems. And often it's because the food has no flavor. And also it could possibly be because the texture, they don't like the texture. I mean, if you're eating mashed potatoes and you put it in your mouth and it has no flavor, it's going to feel like mud in your mouth. So you might have some problems with people who've lost this particular sense. All right, and then we'll go on to hearing loss. The brain, hearing is actually a frequency. Sound is not a solid object. It's a frequency. And when sound comes in, our ear, we have mechanisms in our ear, which we won't go into right now. I have it in my book though, of how we perceive sound and how we're going to interpret that sound is the brain's job. And when the brain is damaged with dementia, it sometimes cannot interpret that sound. It might hear you talking, and if you're talking kind of fast, all it hears is a sound. It does not, the person can't differentiate between the words. So it's incredibly important to talk slowly, enunciate very well, so that they can, and simply. You don't have to give long descriptions of things. Go to the point. It has to be just to the point. It has to be simple and short and very enunciated very clearly. Our brain has a problem. When our brain has a problem with interpreting sounds, they don't know what they're hearing. So it's really important to keep background noise to a minimum. If you're trying to get a message across to your loved one, don't have the TV on and some music going on in the background and outside there's somebody cutting the grass or whatever. They're not going to be able to hear you because all of those sounds start to go into the same basket. So focusing on your voice is incredibly hard if their brain is damaged and it's not going to be wanting to do that. Hypersensitive tactile. I had a woman with dementia tell me that the shower When you turned on the shower, the water hitting her skin felt like it was needles penetrating her skin. So no wonder she didn't want to take a shower. I mean, every time she went in there, it was incredibly painful. They become very, very sensitive with their touch. So how you touch the person is incredibly important. Whether you touch them brusquely or whether you caress them sweetly, how you hold their hand, that is all a major form of communication for them, because they are losing the ability to understand and process words, but their sensory perception of touch is becoming very acute in many cases. And as dementia progresses, I'll talk just a little bit about mind-body disconnect. So especially in those early and mid stages, how they're touched is very important. And what they touch is usually not the same. It's not perceived in the same way that you would perceive the same object. Our skin is the largest organ, and it's what puts us in touch with our environment, our skin. So we measure, our brain measures the temperature. It just measures everything sensory in our environment. So whatever's out there, our brain takes it in and interprets it and tries to make sense of it. Okay. Sensory overload, that's what I was talking about with too much noise. Well, it's not just noise. Sometimes it's visual. Here's a supermarket. A supermarket could look like this. So can you imagine going down a supermarket, you're pushing along with your loved one and you're trying to get them to hurry along because they're just shuffling slowly down the aisle. And to them, what they see is just a blur of color and shapes. They can't differentiate between the shapes. So when you tell them to go in the refrigerator and get the milk, and when they open the refrigerator, this is the next slide. Whoops, wait. Sorry, folks. Oh, I don't have that next slide. It has to do with not being able to differentiate between the objects in the refrigerator. If they can't find the objects on the shelf in the supermarket, how are they going to find the milk between the butter and the tomatoes and the mayonnaise and the everything else? It's going to be extremely difficult for them. It becomes a visual overload. So they have visual overload, auditory overload, and if just too many things are going on with any of their senses, it's an overload. They also lose their direction. I always say their compass is basically damaged. They get confused over where they are or what's right and left. Of course, I get confused with right and left, but you know. So that is a common aspect of the progression. Time perception, we all know that they have really good long-term memory. They can come up with something from first grade, but they can't remember what they did 3 minutes ago. So basically, long-term memory sticks around because it's been used the most. Remember the memory section where I talked about all the pieces and use it or lose it? Well, there's always pieces of those long-term memories that stick. And if it was an experience that was a strong emotional connection, it's a stronger memory. So they would have a long-term memory, but not present. They can't follow steps. Like, how do you make a ham and cheese sandwich? Now that seems like something pretty simple. Oh, let's just make a ham and cheese sandwich. But these steps to making a ham and cheese sandwich are only about 25% of the steps it takes to make a ham and cheese sandwich. First of all, you have to know that the ingredients are in the kitchen. You have to know what a kitchen is. You have to know where the kitchen is in your house. Then you have to walk into the kitchen and figure out where each one of these ingredients are in the kitchen. And it goes on and on and on. So everything we do takes so many steps to do it that we're not even aware of. We just kind of automatically do it because we have memories of the experience and how to do it. Their memories are becoming lost. So these steps are missing. Maybe they're going to remember a couple of these steps, that bread. But will they be able to find the bread? And will they be able to unwrap the package? So the steps to do things is incredibly challenging for a person with dementia. They have irrational thoughts, delusions, paranoia that people are stealing things from them. Of course, they've misplaced something or thrown it away or put it down the toilet. And then they feel someone has stolen it. And then they blame others for it. This is really common with loved ones living at home. They blame their caregivers for whatever's missing or whatever happened or whatever's bothering them at the moment. They believe that somebody's trying to hurt them, come through their window at night and hurt them. I had a lady, Betty, who I took care of at night for a short period of time, and she believed someone was coming through her bedroom and through her window in her bedroom, and she was hysterically frightened, just terrorized. So I went to her bedroom and I said, Betty, come over here. And I looked out the window and I said, look, and you see that car, that red car down there parked on the street? And she kind of squinted and looked, and I said, that's an unmarked police car. And that guy is there every single night now, as of tonight, to make sure that guy doesn't get into your window anymore. Oh, and she went right back to bed, went to sleep. She was calm for the rest of the night. Now, the next night she had the same delusion. So again, I did the same solution. And I only had to do it about 3 or 4 nights, and then it was gone. I call them pegas. In Costa Rica, they call them pegas. It's where something's stuck. It's an idea that's stuck and it hasn't been resolved for them. So it's not going anywhere. So you have to resolve these kind of problems with their irrational thoughts so that they can move on from them. Communication difficulties are when everything hits the fan. When they can't communicate how they feel or what's going on, that's when it becomes the most difficult to care for them or even visit them in a nursing home. The families just sit there kind of trying to figure out what to do or talk to each other. If the person can't communicate, what do you do? Verbal communication obviously becomes a challenge because they're losing words. They're not only losing words, they're losing whole conversations or how to use words to express themselves. Nonverbal communication, which is your facial expressions in your body, are 60% of your communication. And that's the last to go with them. They do interpret your face and how you hold your body. As you can see in this example, you can pretty well tell what the person is feeling by how their body positioning is. And a person with dementia, the problem is they can see your body position and maybe know that you're bored, but they think you're bored with them. Everything is about them. Everything is caused by them. So that's the problem. So in other words, if you're going to be around a person with dementia, you have to be aware of how you're presenting yourself physically and your facial expressions. Hi, how are you? That's going to be interpreted much better than someone who comes in and says, I'm here to visit you. All right. Emotions are contagious. We feel what each other's feels. We have that electromagnetic field that goes out, and emotions are an energy that actually goes out from us and we take in from others. So how you are feeling emotionally with your loved one is passed to them. But again, your loved one doesn't understand that you're exhausted and short-tempered today because they were up all night with them. They only know that you are angry or irritated, and it has to be their problem. In other words, they're feeling your stress. And as a result, they don't know that it's your stress that they're feeling, and they're going to reflect that back to you. So even if you are tired and anxious and so on, trying to mask that is very, very important with dementia, because otherwise you're going to get whatever you're feeling mirrored back to you. So try to be smiley, try to be happy, try to be upbeat if you can. And that's how your loved one will most likely, because it's not 100%, will most likely mirror that back to you. Emotional energy is shared. If you're in a, say for instance, like I was a 60s child and we had demonstrations. If one person got violent and even just started hollering, the whole crowd started to holler. If you're and one-on-one, if you're having an argument with your sister, or your sister comes in and she's angry at you, or just angry, period, you can't help but feel that. And if she's angry at you, you're going to take it in and pass it right back to her. So emotions are shared, they're interchanged. So knowing your own emotions and how to control your own emotions is very important if you're going to be communicating with a person with dementia. Emotional energy also affects the body in different ways. Chinese medicine believes that, for instance, anger is held in the liver. And the liver is also connected to the eyes. So Chinese medicine is 3,000 years old. I mean, there's got to be some validity to it. As you can see, if you think about any kind of an emotion, strong emotion that you've had, say for instance, where do you feel it first when you start to get angry? I feel it in my head. It's like my head starts to get hot. Some people, it's in their solar plexus when they're about to get angry. So your body reacts to your emotions. So they're incredibly powerful. Interesting on this graph is that you see depression. It's like a dead zone. That's exactly what depression feels like. It feels like you're already dead. There's just nothing going on in there. And when you see an MRI of the brain, also the brain activity is diminished by quite a bit during depression. In other words, they're not even thinking. So as you can see in your body, and if you have stress and anxiety over an extended period of time, and say, for instance, it is in your solar plexus, which is a very common place because of the cortisol, you can start to have actual physical damage to your body. And that is what Chinese medicine believes. That's why they do acupuncture and so on, is to release those energy blocks in your body. So the person with dementia, when they get angry, for instance, they can't turn it off. They can't just turn it off. It's coursing through them. If you wake up from a nightmare and you say to yourself, oh my God, my heart is pounding and I'm breathing really quickly. Oh, but it was only a nightmare. How long does it take your body to start to calm down, even after it knows that it's a nightmare? It takes quite a while. So it's important to understand that when your loved one gets angry or upset or scared, it's also a physical reaction as well. So just calming down their mind, you've got to be able to calm down their body too, because it's all involved. Mind-body disconnection, I mentioned that earlier. This is really common as you're going into the later stages. They can't locate their limbs. In other words, they can't tell you where their hand is. If you say, Mom, lift your foot, I'm going to put your shoe on, they might not know what that means. They might not be able to find a foot or know what a foot is. They also don't feel, they feel the pain, but they can't localize it and they can't describe it. So urinary infections are usually quite common with people with dementia, and they're quite frequent. And nobody knows that they have them except for the fact that the dementia starts to accelerate suddenly. One day to the next, the dementia is 10 times, 20 times worse. And that's usually because they're in some kind of pain, but they can't tell you about it because they can't recognize it. They only feel it. So usually when that happens, the first suggestion is to get to a doctor and check for a urinary infection. They also lose, and now this is important to understand, we never think about this, is that our body actually adjusts itself in the space around us automatically. When we were babies and learning to walk, we learned about space. We learned about bumping into things. We learned about falling down. We learned about gravity. Well, you're unlearning it with dementia. At some point, they cannot find their body in the space around them in the room. So they don't know where my skin ends and the rest of the room begins. And I started to think about that, and I thought, what would that be like? That would be sort of like floating in space. I mean, you wouldn't have any concept of your personal physical self. You couldn't feel your person. So that's a pretty interesting thing, I think, to think about. I think about things like that because that affects them, and it affects how they move and how you need to help them move. Oh, now this is interesting. I think a lot about this. It's about self-perception. Who am I? If you lose your past, you lose everything that you've done in your past. You're losing more and more pieces of your past. Then who are you? Who is Katya if I can't remember what I've done in my life? How do I see myself if I don't relate the person I am today to all of those people that became me? And when you lose your self-perception, what happens then? Now, the interesting thing is when a baby is first learning self-perception, it's pretty easy to measure. They look in a mirror and they normally see another baby, and they talk and they get babble and they try to touch the other baby. At some point, they look in the mirror and they go, wow, hey, that's me. That's the beginning of self-awareness. That's when the baby is learning that they are an individual separate from their environment. So it's the moment of separation for us as individuals. We are now no longer just part of everything. I'm Katya. Okay, when a person with dementia, and this happens quite frequently as dementia progresses, looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize themselves anymore, the reverse happens, and they start talking to the person in the mirror as though it's another person. They have lost their sense of self. Like the baby who just learned their sense of self, they have just lost their sense of self. So now, this is the interesting part that I like to think about is if the baby was one with everything around it until it discovered that it was an individual, then the person with dementia who's been an individual all of their lives, when they lose that, they start to become one with everything around them. Some of the highest spiritual beliefs nowadays are what they call oneness, becoming one with everything, becoming one with everybody around you. So that's an interesting concept, that's supposedly a very high spiritual state of being, is to lose your sense of self and start to become part of everything. Anyway, that's just a thought. This man, William Utermohlen, he was a Dutch painter. He's deceased. He decided in 1967, he was a painter, a portrait painter. He decided to start self-portraits of himself during his Alzheimer's dementia. And he got as far as 2000 before he couldn't do anything anymore. And as you can see, the progression of losing self and how he perceived himself. And in 2000, at some point, there was no self anymore. There was ears that he could hear with, but he really couldn't see anymore. He couldn't see himself anymore. So I thought this is very famous. It's on all the internet and everything, this series. Okay, is the mind and the brain generated thoughts the same? Now, our brain is throwing out 70,000 thoughts a day, but is the mind more than that? When our brain is dead, is there still a mind? When we're on an operating table and our brain is asleep, how is it that people are aware? People are aware of what's going on in the operating room. There's been countless near-death experiences that have actually been documented of people being dead clinically dead, no heart, no brain waves, for up to 30 minutes, and coming back and recounting everything that happened consciously of what they were aware of. So is our brain more than just the mind? And if so, what happens to people with dementia? Is there more awareness in them, even though their brain is being damaged? That's my premise for the work I do, actually, is that I do believe there's more to us than just brain-generated thoughts. The subconscious mind is only the conscious mind is only 5% of our thinking. In other words, what we're aware of every single day is 5% of what our brain is doing. All of these elements that you see on this graph is that's our subconscious and our unconscious. And that's operating full-time, both when we're asleep and awake. Okay, our conscious mind isn't necessarily doing much when we're asleep, but our subconscious is just going on like crazy. It's constantly rolling the wheels. So all of these systems are part of our subconscious that we are not aware of. So when a person has dementia, if their conscious mind has been damaged, how are they going to let us know that any of this stuff is still there? So what is left? What is left? We're coming to the end now. Okay, the brain continues to generate thoughts even into the very last stages because it has 70,000 of them per day. And even though those thoughts might be a little disjointed or whatever, there's still thoughts going on in the person's brain, whether they can communicate or not. Their conscious mind is damaged, but the subconscious still has emotions. It still has behavior, learned behavior, habits. It has memories. It has an awareness of the present. The subconscious mind is only aware of the present. Well, guess what happens to people with dementia? It believes anything. Like I could tell Betty that car was an unmarked car. And I was talking pretty much to her subconscious mind. There wasn't a whole lot of conscious reasoning going on. Her conscious mind, her subconscious calmed down because it believed what I said. And all the belief patterns and traumas are in your subconscious mind. And those come out quite often, especially the traumas. They come out very insidiously during dementia. Usually the caregivers don't understand what's happening, but they're actually playing out an old movie reel of some trauma that they've experienced years ago as though it's happening in the present. This is a very common situation, by the way. Memory fragments always remain. There's some kind of memory fragment that remains, and it doesn't have to be a conscious memory. It can be a cellular memory. We remember what it feels like to be hugged. There's a whole lot of memory that we don't have time to go into as far as this presentation. Emotional connections remain. Even though they don't know what your role is. In other words, they don't recognize the daughter anymore. Well, they don't recognize her as a daughter. They recognize her as somebody important to them because they feel the connection. But they can't explain that to the daughter. And all the daughter knows is that mom doesn't recognize me anymore, and it's heartbreaking. If she can get beyond the fact that she doesn't recognize the role, but she still knows that you're important to her, then the daughter wouldn't feel so traumatized because of that. The heart is the second brain, and the Heart Math Institute has been studying the heart, what they call heart intelligence, for over 40 years. The heart has its own neuronal system, just like the brain, but it has its own system, 40,000 neurons. It has a magnetic field. The brain has a magnetic field. The heart has a magnetic field 40 to 60 times stronger than the brain. So in other words, what we feel with our heart is 40 to 60% stronger than our brain. That electromagnetic field, that energy, heart energy, can be detected as far as 3 feet around our body, just like it's a capsule around our body. And when we're standing next to somebody or hugging somebody, we're sharing that field. We're sharing our heart energy. We're sharing our hearts. And the research shows that there is an actual factual connection between emotions and the heart. It's not just something that we think about on Valentine's Day. Okay. The heart connection with people with dementia is never lost up until when they take their last breath. This is important to really get to understand, is that heart connection cannot be lost. It's the brain that's damaged, not the heart. So when you, but it's a nonverbal apparatus. In other words, connecting to someone through your hearts or communicating through your hearts is not about what you say. It's about how you say it. The words don't matter. It's the emotion connected to the words that communicate. So when you communicate how much you love somebody with dementia in spite of their situation, or in spite of the fact they might have just said something nasty, they're going to feel that. That's going to be communicated to them because the words they can't understand any longer. I may forget your role in my life, but I don't forget you. That's the story of the daughter. They forget that it's mom or dad or the husband or wife, but the emotional connection to that person is always there if you look for it. If you feel that, oh, mom doesn't remember who I am anymore, and you're all caught up, and that daughter is all caught up in her sorrow over that, she isn't going to notice that her mother still recognizes her as being somebody important. We never forget the love we receive from someone and the love that we're able to give them. Because a person with dementia feels that in the moment. And it doesn't matter if it's the daughter or the lady who's washing the floors in the nursing home. If that person expresses love and caring to the person with dementia, they will receive it threefold from the person with dementia. And that person will love them equally as it. If you are a family member, you think you love your family more than you love the rest of the world. I know in Christianity, they say that Christ, his message was to love your neighbor as yourself. He didn't differentiate by that you should love your daughter more than your neighbor. So actually, this again goes into a very high spiritual state. The fact that they can feel love for anybody and feel intense love and not love more than for one or the other. They love babies. They don't lose their love of babies. So they've discovered in many nursing homes to help comfort people in later dementia, they give them baby dolls. And they actually perceive that baby doll as a baby, and they're able to express the love that they feel for babies. They love their pets. So there's a lot of pet therapy going on. And people, it's really very, very damaging when a person with dementia loses their pet. They feel the loss. And it's really difficult to replace that love for that pet, to replace a pet for them. And they never forget how you make them feel. So make them feel special. You make them feel special, they remember that you are the person that makes them feel special. They won't consciously say, oh, here comes Katya, she makes me feel so special. No, she will just see me and feel safe and happy with me. Why? Because I make her feel special. So I love this gift. I think their faces are adorable. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. I'd like to, this is my project in Costa Rica. I have been doing it now for 2 years since COVID stopped. So I've been doing presentations in rural areas and in the city here. And now I'm branching out into doing online. Actually, this is my first online group for teaching dementia education. And if you'd like to help out, you can go to the GoFundMe page that is Dementia Education Costa Rica and help out, because we just got our audio visual equipment through donations through GoFundMe, which I've been very, very grateful for, because a lot of times I'd be doing talks where there were none, and it'd be in an open rancho somewhere. So this is really, really great. So any donation would really be very appreciated. And also, I've joined Patreon. Now, many people don't know what Patreon is, but it's an interesting platform where a person can just join and subscribe to Patreon, an individual on Patreon or a group, and help to become their patron. In other words, they get videos. It's a video platform of the information or the music or whatever that person is providing. And they pay $5 to $10 a month. And you receive a certain amount of videos. And at the same time, when there's enough membership, that person is supported. So Patreon is patreon.com/Katya De Luisa. I just signed on today, so I have to get some videos on there. But check it out. It's got a lot of interesting people on it. And for just a simple monthly fee, you can support artists, you can support medical people, you can support a lot of people doing good things in this world. So that's the end of my my presentation. And if anybody would like to, let's all take a deep breath. That was a lot of information. And that was just basics. Oh my gosh, I could keep this up for days.
Wonderful, Katya. Thank you so much. And Maura said something. Oh, no, wait. Yes, Maura had said, so well done, especially doing it on Zoom. And I've put the links in the chat of everything, of the ones that you had at the end of the presentation.
Okay, does anybody have, you can unmute. Everybody can unmute. I have my Sunday group. We don't even mute, and we just kind of like jump in on each other all the time. So go right ahead.
I have a question. It's kind of technical. Okay, you talked about the brain being so much water and so much fat. It was like 60 and 75%. So that equals more than 100%. So I just want to get a perspective on what that looks like. You know, is it just water and fat and these electrons?
Okay, there's 60% fat. I mean, you don't add the two together.
Yeah. So what is that? How does that interpret? Is 60% and
fat, which means it has to have, you have to have a certain amount of cholesterol, a certain amount of healthy oil in your system in order to create the structure of the brain. It's just like we have fat in our body, but we have other material that composes our body. I mean, I'm pretty fat. I'd hate to think I'm 60% fat, but that would mean there's 40%.
Right, but the brain is very fat according to that then, right?
Yeah, it has a lot of, it doesn't have fat deposits, it's composed of fat.
Yeah. It's composed of fat.
Yeah.
In other words, those bulky things you see when you look at a brain, that's mostly fat.
Well, it's 60%.
Mm-hmm. And what else? And then
water. That has to have water. I mean, every cell in our body has to have water.
Yeah, and then anything else? What is it?
Well, I'm not going to go into the whole brain science of it, and I really can't even answer that question because I've never had anybody ask it, and I've never really been too interested in it. So I have to have an interest in something to really research that. I'm assuming it's just like everything else. It has cells, not just neuron cells. It's got glial cells. When you go in, there's a lot of structure, which are cellular structures that are not just neurons or fat or water. Fat and water compose parts of the cells. So you'd have to go in and find out the different types of cells. It's like this hand is composed of a lot of different cells, different types of cells. So I imagine the brain is the same thing. I mean, I am not a neuroscientist.
Okay. Okay. Just wondered. It was just curious.
That's a good question. I'm actually going to go look and find out.
Okay.
Later.
Yeah. And then something else that's more practical. Okay. So 70,000 thoughts did you say per day?
Per day.
Okay. Now you're saying you still, people with dementia still have 70,000 thoughts, or do they actually diminish?
They diminish.
Because sometimes you see a person and they have this vacant look. And
that doesn't mean they're not thinking.
You wonder, what are they thinking? So are they thinking a lot? Or, does their thinking slow down? Or is it fewer thoughts?
Okay. Logically, because there's damage to the information centers, which are the neurons, where thoughts are generated. I mean, we don't necessarily have a neuron with a thought in it. But remember, thoughts are composed like memory of lots of different elements that have to be pulled together in order to think. So I'm assuming if you see the brain with Alzheimer's with all of the empty spaces, that there's thoughts missing. They're not going to have 70,000 thoughts.
Yeah, I don't think so. It must go down.
But if the brain and the mind are not the same, in other words, the mind is not just the brain. Even if you lost thoughts, there would be an awareness. Now, awareness is not necessarily a thought, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they lose total awareness.
So what's left is mostly feeling and awareness.
I believe.
Not as many of these racing thoughts that we have.
No, and also when they're starting to have damaged thoughts, it's broken thoughts. They'll have broken thoughts, or one thought will lead into another, or one thought will make no sense, because remember, they're losing words and they get words confused. And so thoughts also can get that way. Now, the woman that's, I have 2 people with dementia right now in my Sunday discussion group. I'm learning so much from them because I actually did learn most of what I know from people directly with dementia. And she said she was aware of what was going on with her dementia, but it wasn't a thought. She was aware. She knew. It's like she would be speaking very nasty to her caregivers, and she could see herself. She was aware she was doing that, but she couldn't stop it. So the speaking to the caregivers was nastily was the damaged brain, but yet there was an awareness that was aware that she was doing that, even though she couldn't stop it because the brain was damaged. So this is where I'm going with what I'm trying to teach, is that what is actually in there. And I can do that because I'm not a neuroscientist, and I don't have to 100% rely on facts. Just take the logic of what the facts are, and you could say to yourself, well, maybe this is happening because this is happening over here. Well, why wouldn't this be happening? And a lot of the theories I had 25 years ago have become science fact now, 25 years later. They were just theories.
And sometimes when people have strokes, can they have similar kind of symptoms? Because my mother had strokes, toward the end. And some of the things you described, I can attribute to how she was.
It's called vascular dementia, and it's the second cause of dementia after Alzheimer's disease. And usually, if a person is very elderly, because they have circulatory problems, heart problems, it's very common in the very last, people in their 90s, for instance, to get vascular dementia. But you can get a lot earlier. If your blood pressure is high, you're high risk for vascular dementia. Keep your blood pressure under control. Because vascular dementia is a series of small strokes in your brain that damages parts of the brain, and it's not even noticeable. It's not like you lose your arm, the use of your arm or your left side. No, it's usually shows up in dementia symptoms. And
Great,
then
thank you.
Increases.
Thank you very much.
I have a question about Korsakoff.
Great talk.
Who?
I have a question about Korsakoff, Amelika. My cousin in Holland had a brother-in-law that was an alcoholic and had dementia. And she was telling me that he was waiting to go into a Korsakoff center. Does that have to do with alcoholism? My brother also had dementia, alcohol-induced dementia.
I don't know what a Korsakoff center is. I've never heard of that.
Of a Korsakoff, people that, because it was listed on your dementia, types of dementia.
What, they have centers?
Holland, that's why I understand.
Listen, I'm not 100% the expert on this. I can only tell you what I know, and I'm always learning more.
In the US, they just stick you in a nursing home, like, it was my brother, but apparently in Holland, they're different kinds. Centers. I mean, that's the impression I got from her, from my cousin.
You need to ask her about that. I would like you to pass that information to me, because Holland is very advanced in dementia care. Holland's very advanced in a lot of care. Yes. I mean, really, in the world, they're highly advanced. So they actually they created the first dementia village. Maybe that's what she's talking about.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. I would like to know. I'd love if you send that information to me at some point.
Okay. I'll contact my cousin.
Yeah, it's worth. Whenever there's something that I don't know, I will admit that I don't know it, but I would like to know it.
Okay.
I'd like to know more. There's always more to learn. Always more to learn.
Katya, can you tell us a little bit more about Dementia Education Costa Rica and what your project consists of? How much of it's online? How much of it's going rural?
Okay, I've got 7 talks coming up in the next 12 weeks, for instance. And I'll be in 2 small towns between Puriscal and Ciudad Colon, and I'm actually going with the Ministry of Health. They've got a program for health education in the communities throughout the country. So I'm trying to partner with them so that I can get this, because there's no dementia education in the rural areas in Costa Rica. And that's where most of the elderly people are being cared for, is by their families, and the families have no information.
Yes, I live in a rural area in Cartago, and I know about one family. They're taking care of the mother with dementia. They take turns staying there at night, and they shuttle her from one place to another. One brother, one son to another, one daughter.
The problem is if they don't have information to understand what's going on with her.
Yeah.
It's really tragic. I've listened to all the stories, and believe me, there's certain similar threads in the stories, but the thing that I find to be the most devastating is the lack of information. Yeah. And that I would like to see every Empathize clinic in Costa Rica have a 1-hour basic dementia education monthly at the clinic for families. Mm-hmm. I mean, I am fighting for that. I'm definitely a very fierce advocate. So I'm slowly working my way into the bureaucracy. I do not jump into bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy, yes.
Yeah, everybody laughs. Yeah, I can tell you've all been here for a while. So, you just start. I started this program 2 years ago. Now it's getting really popular in the country. At some point, the politicians and the bureaucratic organizations like the health department, the CAHA, they look and they go, oh God, she's doing that. We better get on board. And then at that point, hopefully I'll be able to help to steer the type of education that they're giving in the rural areas, because they can't send a neurosurgeon out to the rural areas and he's going to talk in a language that nobody understands, because these are farmers. So, my Spanish is not the greatest, but it's really good as far as fluency and communication. And they love it because I'm not perfect, and it's easy to understand my Spanish. I'm always like a person with dementia, substituting simple words for things that I can't find. So they really need to train dementia educators, and they do not have to be medical professionals. They just have to have the knowledge to train, to train the basics.
Yes.
So that's what my dementia education is about.
There's some silos, you know, for elderly people, nursing homes. There's one, in the rural areas.
Yeah, there's usually in each larger rural town, they have a nursing home, or maybe more than one. But it's surprising. I've done training in them because back in the early 2000s, I was doing training of a communication process in nursing homes here. And it's amazing how little they know about dementia. They're taking care of them. Yeah. So education for me is, you know, everybody's looking for the cure, but what's happening right now? What's happening with the families? What's happening with the person with dementia?
Yes.
Right now, we've got to find the best way to create quality of life for everybody while they're looking for the cures.
Yeah, you had mentioned that statistic 1.2 million direct care workers will be needed by 2030.
50.
And I was wondering,
by 2050, in less than 30 years.
I was wondering if that was worldwide or if it was more a U.S. statistic. It seems like so many people.
It's a worldwide statistic because it was talking about the 55.2 people with dementia worldwide. Now remember that 55 million is diagnosed. Mm-hmm. Those are statistics of people who've been diagnosed that they've been found. So we could probably triple that with the ones that are not diagnosed or the ones that are just beginning. So it's like Blanco Cervantes Geriatric Hospital, they've calculated 35,000 according to what has gone through their doors in Costa Rica. So
in my perspective, and this is like my middle age, seeing a lot of friends who my age and older who have parents who are elderly. During the pandemic, I felt that there was just a lot of grief by having those older people separated from them, and in nursing homes. And I think I've seen a trend of kind of coming back to a more traditional setup where you take care of elderly people in the home. And do you see that as an actual trend, or is that just
it's not a trend?
It's periphery.
It's not a trend. It's a necessity. Who the heck can afford nursing homes? In the United States, the cheapest nursing home you're going to find is $4,000 a month. And right now they're looking about cutting Medicare and cutting Social Security. They're talking about all this kind of stuff in the States. And for the people lists so that they can get Medicare and it'll pay for their bed in a $4,000. Normally it's going up between $5,000 and $6,000 a month for a nursing home. So here in Costa Rica, it's a lot cheaper. I think the most expensive one is about $2,000 a month, $2,500 a month.
So whether or not, no matter what, there are going to be more people taking care of more elderly people with and without dementia without training. So they're going to need at least this basic understanding. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, what you're doing is so crucial.
Yeah. There are other dementia educators out in the world. It's just that, in this little small fish pond that we all live in here, I'm it, I guess. I mean, there is an organization called Escada that does dementia education, but they've been kind of quiet lately. They've been around for 25 years. They were the actual first Alzheimer's association in the country. But there's been a lot of ups and downs with that organization. I think they got a little bit too bureaucratic, as usual. So because I'm doing this as a volunteer and I'm out there because this is my passion, this is really my passion. And I see the difference. It's interesting. I'll have a talk with a whole group of 30 people in a rural area, and you just see the little lights come on in their eyes. It's, oh my God, there's some hope. Oh, I never thought of that, and that to me means more than anything in the world is that I can give information that will help the people who care for the people with dementia to change their perspective of what's happening with the person with dementia. Because the person with dementia does not have a voice. And I hope to be their voice. I don't, did that sound like I'm kind of on a soapbox when I said that? Oh my gosh, I just got up on a soapbox. But I'm very passionate about this. I truly believe that the way to change the projection, not that dementia is going to diminish because of education, but the care of them is going to get so much better. The quality of life of both parties, not just the caregiver who can express what's happening to them. There's a whole world of hurt that's going on with the person with dementia also. They are not gone. They feel things. And they also feel very strongly when people misinterpret what is going on with them. They're alone inside this condition. No matter how many people around them love them, they're experiencing this alone. And I don't want them to be alone. I want to create a bridge where there can be a meeting of the two. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, it does to me.
Say something?
Helen or Carlin, do you have questions?
No, I was a nurse. That makes a lot of sense.
Oh, great. Thank you for coming from a nurse. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the validation, Helen.
Yes.
Great information. Unfortunately, I joined a bit late, but I really enjoyed the information. It's my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and so I could relate to a lot of what you were saying. And she lasted with Alzheimer's because she didn't have any health issues for 15 years before she finally. No, not on her own, but I mean, we had caregivers that, someone that would go, we had caregivers go in and take, first it was family care. And then when it got to be a bit too much, we had someone would go in and help her in the days and family care in the evenings. But, always when she got diagnosed, you think, oh, it's going to be, they're going to be gone in a couple of years. And she lasted 15 strong years. That's good. That's
life
great.
Expectancy is 7 to 20 years with Alzheimer's.
Yeah. And so I really love your passion, and I'm already sitting here thinking how I can get it into. I will be contacting you to get some messages out to some of my church groups, because we have a lot of, both English and Spanish speaking people that can benefit from this. So
great.
Yes.
I greatly appreciate it. I pretty much, wherever the door opens, I just go through it. I've after COVID, when I was first starting with this, I was trying to knock on a lot of doors, and I discovered that was just kind of spinning my wheels. So I just, wherever the door would open, I would head that way. So if your church group is, wanting a presentation, con mucho gusto. I'll make some time.
Yeah, Sarah, if you can share her contact information, because I'm thinking, I was sitting here while you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, we could do one session and, an hour session and take a break, and then have another hour session for, one in English, one in Spanish, so that you can get both crowds.
We can talk about it.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes it's a little hard because I put out a lot of energy in the groups when I have live groups. Actually, it's easier for me online, but when I have a live group, I'm usually exhausted at the end of the. I'm 75. I have to be realistic about the amount of energy I have and how I can keep it. How I can keep it.
Yeah, I understand.
But I would be willing to do two separate talks, as long as there's enough people that you guys can get together. Because there is I have to drive to. Where are you at?
Santana.
Oh, well, you're just down the street from me. I live in Ciudad Colon. That's no problem.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, by the way, I'd like to invite everybody to join in on the discussion Sundays. I post them on Facebook. You just have to email me your email address so I can put you in the group. And we have, it's an hour discussion. It's not a support group. It's just anybody can join, even if you don't have somebody with dementia and you just want to learn more. And it's people from anywhere. I mean, we're just starting. We just had our second meeting. I think we had 8 people. And so our third one is this Sunday. And it's very dynamic because we have a couple of people who have dementia who describe what's going on with them. So we're all learning from them, including me. And then we discuss everything from symptoms to world problems because of dementia, what can be done later on in the future, and what happens with families. I mean, the discussion kind of evolves, and it's very interesting, and I'm really enjoying it, actually.
What time on Sundays?
It's at 9 o'clock in Costa Rica.
Okay.
We're also recording it now. I mean, we had a couple, the first two meetings were kind of trial and error. So as of this next Sunday, we'll be recording the meetings. It's open to the public. It's not, private meeting. And so anybody who's signed up as a member, I will send them the recording. So if they can't be present, they at least can see what was discussed.
That's great.
Thank you. And I'll pass you the list of everybody who registered, and
thank you.
So that we
Thank
can
you so much. This was really informative.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katya.
It's my pleasure. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
So are we ending the meeting, Sarah? What's going on?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to see if anybody had any follow-up questions. I see Gabriella, you just hopped on.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had something to do with my mom, and I apologize. And I guess I just got the time wrong. So I thought I was going to be a little late, but obviously I'm totally late. Hi to everybody. Sorry.
That's okay.
We'll post this on YouTube, on the PWNCR YouTube, and then, of course, if you have questions, if you want to join Katya's Sunday Zooms as well, you'll receive those in your inbox, the invites for that.
Great. Thanks a lot. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Have a great afternoon, y'all, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye.